Hi, welcome to my video review of Red Menace, a new game by White Dog Games. This is a game that depicts an hypothetical nuclear war between Soviet Russia and Western forces during the Cold War. It concentrates on strategic bombers that are trying to destroy enemy cities, and on the other hand also on interceptors that are trying to stop those bombers. Here you have the map, which represents the United States, Canada, UK, and Soviet Russia, and the North Pole. Then we have a player aid in which you will place the markers that correspond to the bombers forming each Soviet flight. Soviet flights are groups of 3 bombers. When they enter the board in Soviet cities, you place the marker on the board, but you do not know exactly what bombers form those. But when the when the flights enter one of the axes of the DEW line, which are these axes here with the symbol, then you draw Soviet bombers from a cup to reveal what bombers are forming that flight. You place the corresponding bombers on that player aid, and well, now you know what you're facing. And those bombers are already on the player aid at the beginning of the game, because the game in this scenario starts with the enemy flights, the initial enemy flights already on the DW line. In this scenario, which is the Soviet attack scenario, you also have 6 of your own bombers that start on the map in cities of your own choice. Some basic concepts about the units. Main units in the game are bombers and interceptors. Bombers have a movement allowance, which for most bombers is of 1x per turn. Range of 0, most bombers can only attack target cities in the same hex in which the bomber is. Attack value, this is the number that the bomber needs to roll on a d6. It needs to roll the number higher in order to score a hit. And then defense. The bomber may have a defense modifier that will make it harder for enemy interceptors to destroy that bomber. Here we have a Soviet bomber that has pretty much the same stats but no defensive bonus. Then we have interceptors. Interceptors only have one value printed on their counter, and that is the attack value. Same thing, the interceptor needs to roll that number or higher to destroy an enemy bomber. The interceptors do not have movement values because they are not deployed on the map normally. They do not move from hex to hex on the map like bombers do. They're placed on a player aid that simply keeps track of them. This way you know which bombers are ready. Those are the ones in the ready box of their own country, of their own area, and then after they've been deployed to the map, they attack, and then they go back to that player aid. They go to the refuel and rearm box, and then they are moved back to the ready area next turn. Also, we have an American submarine here that is a pretty powerful weapon, but it's a little slow. It takes it a while to get close enough to Russian targets to really start doing damage. But when it gets there, it can be powerful. And the idea of the game is that you are trying to bomb Soviet cities and to destroy as many as possible, to bring as much destruction on your opponent as possible, while defending your own cities. And at the same time, the Soviet side, which is controlled by an AI, will try to do the same. You have to defend against the Soviet bombers that are trying to destroy your cities. I may have forgotten to say at the beginning that this is a solitaire game, so yes, you, the player, control the forces of the West, and the AI of the game will control the Soviet forces. Turn structure. At the beginning of each turn, you draw an event marker. Pretty simple, pretty standard. You draw the event marker, you look at the table, and you see what event that corresponds to. For example, here we have the Soviet sub-attack, which can be particularly nasty. Other events may be, well, advantages for you, or maybe such things as Cuba enters the conflict and sends a flight of bombers against you. Several things may happen. Then you have a new flight entering the game, entering the fight. Each turn there is a Soviet flight that enters the board, and each flight has a letter. Here on the board at the beginning of the game we have flight A, B, and C, and then available to the Soviet AI are flights with letters from D to J. So this turn we add letter D, next turn E, and then F, and so on and so forth. Before we add that flight, we need to determine the starting city. We draw a marker from this cup, and that tells you a number, and Soviet cities are identified by red numbers on the board, so we place the flight there. Then we also need to determine where that flight is going. At that point we look at this table here, and we roll a d6, and we cross-reference the result of the d6 with the starting base of the flight, and that will give us a letter that corresponds to a Western target that the bomber, the flight is trying to reach. Then we record all that on that Soviet flight's player aid, and we write the name of the number of the starting city here, and the letter corresponding to the target here. Here there are slots to place the counters corresponding to the bombers that form the flight, but when the flight enters the game we do not know exactly what those bombers are, so we do not place anything there. We only have the marker on the board, which is like a blip on the radar. We know that something is there, but not exactly what that something is. After we place the new flight, you move all Soviet flights, including the one that you just added to the board. Then all enemy flights then moved onto axis forming the DU line are detected. There are also other situations that will detect enemy flights. Then you simply draw 3 markers from the cup, and you form the new flight, and you place those markers corresponding to bombers on that player aid there. All enemy flights move by 1 hex per turn. If at the end of movement 1 or more enemy flights are on your own cities, then you can, and you should, deploy interceptors to destroy those flights, or to destroy the bombers forming those flights. You really need to defend your cities. When flights of the enemy are flying over your own cities, then you use your interceptors, you allocate them to specific axes, you roll dice, you match the results with the number to hit of the interceptors that you're using, and simply based on that you see how many hits you have, and each hit eliminates an enemy bomber. After this, if an enemy flight that still has bombers in it has reached its target, as it was determined when the flight entered the game, then the flight attacks. For each bomber forming the flight, you roll a die, and the bomber scores a hit against the city by rolling its attack number or higher. If the city is hit, kaboom, big trouble, then you have to draw a marker to determine the type of damage, the amount of damage that was dealt, and that also corresponds to the number of victory points that the opponent gains, which can be 10, 5, or 86. In that case, you need to roll to determine the exact amount. Also, enemy flights will be attacked if they fly over other types of defenses, such as this one. There are several ways in which, yes, bombers can be attacked. Interceptors are the main one, though. After the enemy turn is over, then it is your turn, which is pretty much the same as the enemy ones. It is very specular. The only difference is that you also get to move your sub, or to use your sub to attack if the sub is in range to enemy cities. But the main phases are, first you deploy new bombers on the board, and you choose the cities where you deploy them. Then you move all of your bombers on the board by their movement allowance, and they have to move. They cannot just sit there in the middle of the sky. After that, your bombers that are flying over enemy cities or enemy defenses are attacked by enemy interceptors, following the same procedure. The interceptors roll dice, you lose bombers. After that, your surviving bombers that are over their target city, and you choose the target city, and you do not have to commit to a target city at the beginning, like the Soviets do. Well, your bombers that are over a city and that they want to attack, they can attack it, they roll a die. Each bomber also die. you see if you hit, and if you hit, you place a marker there. Woohoo! And the game continues like this until either you score 50 points against the opponent, you inflict 50 points of destruction on the opponent, then you win the game, or the AI inflicts 50 points of destruction on you, and then you lose the game. There are also other conditions that can be used to determine victory, but that one is the main one. So what do I think about it? Well, this is not a bad game. I like the theme, I like the general idea, I like the fact that the game is fast, that you can play World War III in an hour or less, that the mechanics are pretty linear, that there is a little bit of historical flavor. This is not a simulation by any means, but there is enough historical flavor here, I would say, to make things interesting. Not huge historical chrome, but good enough. However, there is something here that must be said, that this is a game that has little decisions, or I would say it has some decisions, but it seems like it has almost no hard decisions. When you place your new bombers, you probably will not want to place them here because this is very far. You'll try to place them as close as possible. You will to the enemies. You will try to reach city targets that are as close as possible. You will try to avoid enemy defenses, that you do by flying around them. It is not like you really need much subtlety to bring your bombers to the target. You need to be lucky so that the interceptors do not destroy you and you can survive that attack. There are ways in which you can maximize your possibility of escaping enemy interceptors, but again, those are not hard to figure out. They're not hard to implement. It just seems obvious what you should do next. And again, it is not all that different if you go one way or the other. And of course, then the enemy doesn't do anything but just coming down and destroying things. And you, of course, will want to deploy your interceptors where there are targets of the enemy, where there are bombers that you can destroy, and so on and so forth. I've read online that people have compared this game to B-17 Queen of the Sky or B-29 Super Fortress, in that those games also do not have many choices for the player. I think that from that point of view, the connection is accurate. Yes, this is also a game that doesn't give you many choices. It gives you more choices than, say, B-29. But again, those are choices that don't feel all that relevant. On the other hand, a game such as B-29 is extremely detailed. It gives you a virtual immersion into the theme. It is much more thematic than this one. What you lose in that game from the point of view of decision making, you gain from the point of view of the appreciation of history that you gain by experiencing that sort of, like, again, virtual immersion. Here you do not really have that because you do not have many decisions, and again, the theme is represented with very wide brushstrokes, which are enough to make you feel that you're playing a game about this theme and not another one, but still, it doesn't feel uber thematic. It doesn't feel all that detailed. It is a good game, one that I found enjoyable. I didn't find it all that exciting, even at times in which I was a little behind, and then I would gain some advantage of my opponent, just because I didn't feel that I was deserving, that my gaining an advantage on the opponent was the result of my taking big risks, making very smart decisions, cracking the puzzle of going through enemy defenses. Even when I won, even when I did well, I felt that pretty much I was lucky, as I was following pretty obvious lines of decision making, pretty obvious directions. So that to me is the weak point of this design. If you do not mind that, if you like the idea of playing World War III in under an hour in a game that is pretty simple to play and to learn, then this could be a good game for you. The components are overall nice, the counters are thick and nice looking, the play rates also look nice, especially if you don't look too close, because then you can see that actually the images reveal the pixels that they're made of. The pixels are pretty big, but if you're just looking at the normal standard distance, that is, the distance you're looking at when you're playing a game, So this is not a bad game. I found it enjoyable overall. I enjoyed going along with the ride, seeing what happened, seeing how the story developed before my eyes. It is just that I would have liked to be able to take a more active role in the development of the story. I would have liked to feel more like the protagonist rather than just the witness.